they called me Marina. And he said, Marina, pray for Ecari. So I bowed my head and I could not say a word. And I began to cry. I couldn't help it.
All my life long I had panted for a drink from some clear spring that I hope would quench the burning of the thirst I felt within.
You're listening to Singing Their Song.
Hi, I'm Maxine.
And I'm Rebecca. We're glad you joined us.
Hello.
Hey, Ayubagiwa.
Hey, Buggy, you are.
How are you?
Hey, honey.
I don't remember my part after that. Hey, Ania.
And then you say, hey, yitty.
Uh-huh.
Hey, yitty.
Hey, Yitty.
Uh-huh. Aww.
How was your birthday?
Well, it was nice, and I have still enjoying all my flowers.
Good. You got more flowers?
I got more flowers and some white roses.
Very nice.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm glad. I was telling Evan about the white roses. He was getting a kick out of the story. So, yeah.
Aww.
That's awesome. Well, is it a good time?
Sure it is.
Okay. So last time we talked and met, we talked a lot about language and things like that, and faux pas, and then we talked about this time maybe talking about the heroes, the Aioreo heroes that you knew and worked with. So what do you think about that?
That sounds good.
Okay. Is there somebody you would want to start with?
I think I want to always start with Ecari.
Okay.
Because Ecari is very, very close to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And Ecari was, he had a very important father,
Mm-hmm.
which should have made him a very important son.
Okay.
But his father gave his life for the tribe, for his little group that, the IRA travel in small groups.
Mm-hmm.
And they were in their travels in the jungle when when they are in their stopping place. And then men are chosen to go up into the high trees and watch over the jungle for any danger that could be coming toward them. And then the rest of the people can relax. Well, Ecari told me this story, and he said that he was just a tiny little toddler at the time, but he said that the people that watch, the men that watch the jungle, all of a sudden called and said, "Cognone Edi ki," and they said, "People are coming." And then they said, "The people with guns." So Ecari's father, who was kind of the leader of their group, said, "I want you to leave, all of you leave, and I will sell myself for you."
Oh, wow.
So they just picked up their bags and took off running and running and running and running, so that till they were sure that the civilized people weren't following them with their guns. But Ecari's father stayed there. This is a hero story. Ecari's father stayed there, and he pretended to be many people. So while the civilized people were coming with their guns, he would run to one end of the camp and shoot an arrow and yell at them. And then he'd run farther off here and shoot an arrow and yell at them and go toward them. And it took him a while to realize it was just one man. And when they realized it was one man, they just headed right into the camp and they killed him.
Wow.
And then later they sent a group back to check what had happened to him after some time had elapsed and found him dead.
Wow.
And so that hero was the example that Ecari used. I heard this story while we were translating. And we were translating John 3:16, where it says, "And God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son." Have I told you this?
No, I've never heard this.
Oh, okay. And that was my try, because I always did my try at translation, and then he'd tear it apart. And so he says, well, for one thing, you can't give a person. God couldn't give his son. He could send his son, but but to give him, he said, no, he sold his son. And I said, sold him? Why would you say sold him? And then he told me that story about how his father had sold himself for his people. And then he said, isn't that what God did for us?
Wow.
He sold his son for us, so we wouldn't have to go to hell. He sold his son for us.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. And so that's how I learned the story of Ecari's father.
How old was Ecari when that happened? Do you know?
How old
was he? Just a young child, or was?
He was just very young, and but his mother ran with him. Well, after they had been contacted, and they were now living in brand new Tobite, when it was just started, when a few groups had come out of the jungle to be there, and Ecari's mother died. And that made him an orphan. Well, the IRA had the belief that for a young man to be called a man, he had to kill. He could kill an enemy, IRA. He could kill the possessions, like the cows or the animals of a civilized person, or he could kill a civilized person.
Wow.
But the easiest kill was an orphan. Orphans were easy game for young men to kill. And Degui, one of the leaders he became one of the leaders in Tobite, but at this time he was a teenager, and he decided to become a man, and he chose Ecari to be his victim.
Oh, wow.
And so he would taunt him every day. And one of his favorite ways to taunt him was to shoot an arrow and grab it quick. But Ecari, of course, never knew when he was going to let that arrow go.
Yeah.
And of course, it made all the young men laugh, and and they enjoyed taunting Ecari. And then one day he didn't grab the arrow in time, and it went through Ecari's eye, and he was blind in one eye the rest of his life. And then after that happened, Nakore, he was already a leader of the IRA, well respected, and he wasn't a cruel leader. Naturally, he killed people in their warfare, but he was very kind, and he never lost that. And so when an orphan is considered another person's possession, then he can't be a victim. So Nakore chose Ecari to be his possession.
Wow.
And so Ecari and Nakore were forever like father and son after that. And Degui had to give up using him as his victim. And so Ecari lived after that. And when Jean Di Johnson was doing all of her different things, finalizing her study of the language and all, before she put that mantle on me to do her footwork. But she talked with Ecari a lot, and she really saw in him a sterling quality. And so she said, Ecari, and she showed him her watch, and she said, this tells me where the sun is in the sky. And if you'll let me teach you to read, I'll give you my watch. And you can know where the sun is in the sky. And so she bribed him, and he was all for it. And she taught Ecari to read long before anyone else learned to read. And it was God preparing him for what was coming.
Yeah.
And then a group of the young men heard that way down in Rincon de Tigre, the corner of the Tiger, it was a village where the Latvian Baptist people they had a boarding school for Bolivian kids. And they not only taught them really well in really lots of courses of study, but they also tried to lead all these young people to the Lord. Well, when Ecari and Beui and Diide and a bunch of the young kids, probably 14 or so, they decided, why don't we go down there and go to that school? So they went down there and they went to that school.
Wow.
And so all these 4 or 5 boys that went down there became not totally proficient, but somewhat proficient in Spanish, which was a godsend to us translators. And so when I would translate, Ecari could read and follow in Spanish. Well, by the time I was working on translation, Ecari had contracted tuberculosis. And Howard didn't want us inside because he knew that I could get it from him and be contagious. So he made us a picnic table type of table outside under our shady tree. And that's where Ecari and I started translation. And we really enjoyed translating together. This is just a side of thing. Carol Ann was a little tiny girl when I started. And she was just beginning to talk. And she called the other missionary men Unca, for uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she heard Ecari, and in her little mind it was Uncarai. And so when he would be coming up the hill to help me, she'd say, "Here comes Uncarai."
Aww. I bet he loved that. How old?
And
So how old was he when you started working with him?
well, he was already married by this time. See, I did about 15 years in Tobite, helping with getting finalization of the language, working on primers, doing all kinds of needed linguistic type stuff. And so I didn't start translating until I'd been there 15 years.
Wow.
And Carol Ann was my little tiny one at that time. So Ecari had married and had two children. One probably had, what do you call it, when they're born, can't walk and things.
Oh, like rickets? Is that...
No, he was born with it. It
Oh.
was, anyway, he couldn't walk. And but Ecari and I did fine until one day we were working on some verses in Romans. And he was making fun of the Catholics. And he said on the first chapter where it says they worship the creature instead of the creator. And he said, yeah, those Catholics, they talk to dolls for idols. And I said, well, this is more like the creature, like animals. And I said, like the Ayore. And I told him, like the Ayore worshiped the bird god. And boy, he shut up.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I think Aunt Trisha at one point was telling me about the bird god. That's a pretty tough deity.
That is they believe the bird god cannot bless or help. All the bird god can do is do bad things to you. So if they do the celebration every year, that protects him from the wrath of the bird god, who is a very angry god. And yet, whenever an IRA, even after they weren't doing the bird festival, even any time they mentioned the bird, they would talk about the bird in the diminutive form, which is the way you show great respect to anything. And they'd say the little bird, and that meant the honored bird. Well, Ecari kind of clammed up, left early, and I told Howard, I think I made a great big boo-boo, Howard. I thought he was mature enough spiritually for me to share this. And Howard says, well, he had to at some time know that bird god and the worship of the bird god was worshiping the creature instead of the creator. And but I couldn't hardly sleep. I was so troubled. Well, Howard used to go down early every morning and sit around when the men were doing their planning for the day, and then they'd give him a space to teach a little bit. And he said, well, Eckhart, I taught this morning. And I said, he did? Guess what he taught about? And I said, I don't know. And he said that there are only two powers, God and Satan. And anything that we worship that's not God is worshiping Satan.
Wow.
So the bird god, if we worship that, that was like worshiping Satan. And my mouth flew open and my heart was at ease.
Mm-hmm.
But he fought that battle out. But in all of my texts that I have taken on things he taught, he still was very careful to speak about the little God, the little bird. And I don't know that anyone ever stopped using that respectful term because some were lingering. They were afraid of it. But kind of were the way we are too.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you've been raised that way and that's been embedded in your culture, that would be really hard to let go of. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at least they they stopped the worship of it, and the festival of it. We never told them to do it. They did that on their own when they began to have God's word. But anyway, Ecari was extremely precious to me. And I could go on about the way different things we translated, but fast forwarding, when Howard was asked to be the government representative for the mission, we had to move up to Cochabamba. And I wasn't finished with the New Testament. I had so many more books to do. So Ecari said, well, he would come up. He'd make that trip. And he did, as long as his health held out. But when he could no longer come, then other men came. And that's how I finished the New Testament. But one day we got a radio message from Tobite, and it said, if you want to see Ecari alive, you better come, because his battle with tuberculosis was ending. So we got a plane flight, and we flew into Tobite, and they took us right away over to Ecari's house, and his wife had him all cleaned up, and he just was laying on their little bed with a white sheet on him, and there was a lot of the other Christian men in the room, and one of the men said, they called me Marina, and he said, Marina, pray for Ecari. So I bowed my head, and I could not say a word. And I began to cry. I couldn't help it. And I looked down at Ecari, and he had a grin clear across his face. He was just enjoying my crying and my sorrow. And the Ayore believe that if there's no one to cry for you, it's a sad death. But if you have people crying for you, it's a happy death. So I said, I think God just took away my words and gave me tears instead, because it sure made him happy, because he smiled at me. And that was the last time I got to see him. But the Ayore came to really, really honor him as their spiritual leader. And he was the one that really opened things up at the new contact in Paraguay. The Ayore were contacted many years after they were in Bolivia. And these were the enemies of the Ayore in Bolivia. And one of our missionaries asked Ecari if he would go to Paraguay with him. and preach to his former enemies. And Ecari said he would.
Wow.
But they wouldn't let them, the two of them, come into the camp until they checked them out. So the men met them on the road, the chiefs, and they said, you're coming in peace. He made sure they were coming in peace.
Mm-hmm.
So they let them come in to preach. Well, I mean, Ecari just really, really gave them messages about Jesus and all about the Lord. And when he was getting ready to return to Bolivia, a lot of the men came up to him with their clay pipes. And they said, we want to give you our clay pipes, because they believed there was power in tobacco. Mm. And they didn't smoke because they were addicted to their pipes. They smoked for the power. And so Ecari went back. He said, we want your people to know we are peaceful now, and that we really believe in Jesus. And they'll know we're truthful because you're taking our pipes back with you.
Oh, wow.
And so and Ecari took the pipes back. So, yeah, I could tell story after story about that hero.
Yeah, sounds like an amazing guy.
Mm-hmm.
So was he, like, how did he come to be that position? Was that something that he just, was it like kind of a natural, like, building of the relationship, I guess? Or was it just like he heard you had a need and volunteered? Or like, what was that like?
Well, he gave me his testimony once. We had a missionary in Tobite. Didn't stay very long, but he had a huge family, and things didn't go too well there with her, and she had kind of culture shock, and they didn't stay very long. But he had a great heart for the witnessing. Mm. And Ecari and Fred were going into town to pick up supplies that were coming in on the train. And as they were going into town, Ecari told me that a man, a civilized man from a ranch town, came by the tractor. And Fred, he greeted and kind of waved as he went by. And all of a sudden, Fred put his brakes on and stopped the tractor, and he yelled at the man on his horse, and he said, wait for me. And so Ecari's observing all of this, and he said, Fred ran down the road, and he pulled out a tract that gives the gospel, and he said, I was going to go right on, but the Lord spoke to me and told me to run down here and give you this tract. And so the man took the tract, and so Fred came back, got in the tractor, and started up, and Ecari said that he thought to himself, how did God speak to him? Mm. I want a relationship with God where he speaks to me. And he said that really he believes that was the moment when he was really born again.
Sounds like it to me. Yeah.
Yeah, he was really born again because it was like he wanted to have a relationship with God like that, where God could talk to him.
What a simple thing, too, to like, I'm sure Fred is his name. I'm sure when he said, well, God spoke to me, he wasn't thinking that was going to be the thing.
Oh, no.
You know? It was just part of his...
We never know, do we?
We don't. And how God would use just that, and knowing that Ecari craved the relationship piece and being able to hear from God. That's pretty
And
cool.
and I don't know if Fred ever got to hear that story or anything. It seems like, I can't remember for sure, but it seems like they broke up after they got back to the States or something. I can't, it was kind of tragic what happened to their family, but he knows now if he's with the Lord.
Yeah.
He knows the fruit of that little time that he gave his life to. I don't think any of us ever know.
No, that's
I
kind of the
think we
magic
could
of
all
it.
tell stories about that.
That's true. Yeah, that's kind of the magic of it, is because we never know what it is that, yeah, like that, what we're going to say that God can use. And so it's just being authentic. And sometimes we don't have to be overly preachy, right? Well, most of the time, right? We don't have to,
No,
like, it just be authentic, you know?
that's right. Yeah, and that's what I feel like at my advanced age. um, if I can, if all that anybody remembers about me when I die, she really loved Jesus. That's okay for me.
Yeah.
You know, that not, I don't want to be remembered for anything else. That to me, um, what other thing is there that's important? You know, everything like was sort of incidental. You know, I'm translating, so I'm also helping these men who are my translation helpers to know more about the word. There's a side benefit of, I'm thinking of the IRA, but God's thinking of these men growing into leadership, because all of the men that helped me with translation became leaders, spiritual leaders and teachers.
Well, and it sounds like Ecari kind of did a good job continuing with that authenticity as well in his ministry, right? And
Yeah.
that's what, you know, because like you've mentioned, I think my whole life, you've always said, you know, people, nobody wants to be your project.
That's right.
And it sounds like he did a good job not making people a project, just sharing, you know, just.
No, and he was, oh, his messages on iore.org, they're just long list, you know. Just if you want a blessing, I said, move over, Billy Graham.
Okay. Challenge accepted. You need to look up. And so his messages are on iore.org?
Yes.
Okay.
They're on iore.org. So are Dehides, who I can tell about next. And so are Kaduis. So are
Okay.
Orchides. I mean, there's all kinds of messages there. Kumais.
I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're all on there, and there's lots of testimonies on there too, where it's just people sending me, like, a lot of the women. After I moved out and I was living in Cochabamba, I'd get tapes from them, and they would be telling me their testimonies, and they're all on IRA.org. IRA.org, it's all in the voice of the IORA. No preaching of missionaries. It's all, no testimonies of missionaries. Our voice is not there. It's all IORA, and it's in 3 languages, in English, Spanish, and IORA. So you can click on English and read any of that.
That's wonderful.
And the bird god, how they worship the bird god, that's all on there. Okay. What they did, and a lot of other cultural items are on there.
Okay.
The only part that has anything of my work and that is the one called Tools, and that's got the grammar, the dictionary, the things that were tools for people to learn the language.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. I love that you did that. That's such a cool project.
Yeah. Took years. Years and years and years.
Yeah. I remember Trisha talking about it when it first started, and yeah, it's pretty neat.
And she and Carol Ann are going to be the ones who carry it on after I'm gone. The main reason I want it there is that the IRA language never be lost.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful language and a
It
beautiful
is,
people.
and tribal languages are dying and dying and dying and dying. And the thought, I'm sure the Lord wanted me to do this so that Ayore would not die. And the wonder of it all, when I first started translating, one of our co-workers said, by the time you finish a whole New Testament, he had no idea how much of the Old. He said, by the time you finish the New Testament, they'll all be talking Spanish. They're not going to want their own language. They not only wanted their own language, they wanted the Old and New Testament put together in one book.
There you go.
And that just happened a couple years ago.
So can I ask you, because you hear, something that strikes me is when you talk about them, I can see, we're on face to face. I can see the love that you have for them. You can hear it. It's obvious you love these people. How did that, because we've talked in the past about it wasn't easy. There were some really, really, really hard things that you went through. And you were only like 19, right? When you were like 20. You were this young person trying to get to know this people that was kind of scary. And so how did you, and maybe this is a bigger thing and we could talk about it later, but how did you go from fear to love? What was that like? At what point did you realize I love these people?
I want to tell you something that we have. One of my heroes is called Sophie Muller, and she was a missionary in Colombia and the border of Colombia and Venezuela. And by herself went tribe to tribe to tribe to tribe, broke down languages, taught people to read. I mean, just unbelievable. And someone once said to her, you must really have loved those people. And she was kind of a strong woman. She says, I did not. I love Jesus. I loved certain ones of the IRA like brothers and sisters. But to say, my motivation was my love for the IRA. No. My motivation was Jesus. As far as the fear, I never did get over the fear. I never conquered fear, and I can't say I've conquered it to this day. In many areas, I get afraid, but fear that holds you back is sin. But fear that you go forward with is not sin.
That's faith. That's
faith. That's faith. And so I just feel like I'm not a courageous woman. I maybe be a little bit obedient.
You've done some pretty courageous things, though.
but it appears so. But but to quote my dear Sophie Muller, in me, in my flesh, there dwells no good thing. I'm with Paul. In my flesh, there lives no good thing except the Holy Spirit, except Him, and imparted righteousness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it where in Hebrews it says about Noah. It said, as it sums his part in the faith chapter, it says, and he inherited the righteousness that is by faith. Just the righteousness that okay, I'm not righteous, but I'm going to let you put your righteous in me. Yeah.
Great answer. I think that explains a lot, because like I said, it was these two pieces that you see, and but that explains a lot. It's that love of...
That's what people will say. Oh, I wish I had your faith. And I think you do, because Romans says, according as God has dealt to every man the measure of faith. You've got it. Every man has. It's just, where will I invest it?
Yeah, it's a good word.
We've got it.
It's a good
But
word.
we invest. It's our spiritual currency.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
As always, this was awesome. I love that you're sharing so much, and I hear something new every time. And I think when we first started this, I thought, I know all the stories. And I clearly did not. So thank you for sharing.
So we'll have to do the other heroes next time.
Yes.
Some other heroes.
Yeah, I'm thinking you let me know next time, and we can record a few on heroes. I'm okay with that.
Hallelujah, I have found Him, whom my soul so long has craved. Jesus satisfies my longing, through His blood I now am saved.
If you want more information about our time in Bolivia, go to ayore.org. That is spelled AYORE.org.